The knock on my front door came at exactly 9 a.m. a time, too precise to be casual and far too early for a social visit. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked carefully through the living room, past the window where the morning light caught the lace curtains just right, making the whole room look like a memory. I opened the door to find my son, Daniel, standing on the porch in a pressed polo shirt, khakis, and that polite but firm expression he used when he was trying to sell someone something. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood his wife, Kim, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a leather folder that looked far too professional for a visit to one's mother, and flanking them both, like overqualified furniture, were two people I didn't recognize, a woman in a navy pantsuit with a clipboard, and a man with a camera slung around his neck. "Mom," Daniel said, stepping forward like he had a right to my time, my space, and my attention. "I told you we'd be stopping by this morning. Didn't you get my text?" I'd just chosen not to reply. "Good morning," I said, careful to keep my voice neutral. "Is there something I can help you with?" Kim stepped forward, all sugar and sunshine. "We just thought it might be time to do a little check-in, make sure everything's working okay around the house. The heater, the railings on the stairs, your shower. It's really about your safety." The woman with the clipboard chimed in. "We're from Silver Horizons Senior Care Consulting. Your son mentioned some concerns. We just want to make sure the environment is still appropriate for independent living." I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. I knew what this was. This wasn't a wellness check. This was a setup. The man with the camera raised it slightly and said, "Mind if I take some photos, just for the home safety audit?" "Actually, I do mind," I said, stepping into the doorway, planting myself firmly between them and my home. "No one takes pictures in my house without my permission." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mom, don't be difficult. We're trying to help." "Help who?" I asked calmly. "Me, or yourselves?" Kim gave a little laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Edith, this isn't about anything sinister. But let's be realistic. This house is a lot for one person to manage. And you've mentioned having some back pain recently." "I mentioned it to my doctor," I snapped. "Not to you. And certainly not as an excuse for anyone to start measuring me for a nursing home bed." The woman with the clipboard looked uncomfortable now. "If this isn't a good time, it's not," I said firmly. "And if anyone here takes a single step over this threshold without a court order, I'll be calling the police. Are we clear?" There was a beat of silence, the kind that grows thick with unspoken intentions. Daniel exhaled slowly, the way he used to when I didn't give in to his teenage tantrums. "This is for your own good, Mom. I'll be the judge of that," I said. "Now, unless you've brought me a bagel and an apology, I suggest you get off my porch." They left, eventually, the way bad ideas tend to retreat when confronted with firm resistance, but I stood at the door long after they drove away, heart pounding, hands trembling not from fear, but from fury, because I knew now, it wasn't a hunch. It wasn't paranoia. They wanted my house. By noon that day, I was at my kitchen table, with my old black binder open, the one Harold and I had kept for decades, long before the kids ever cared what we owned. It was filled with every important paper, the deed to the house, our wills, Harold's life insurance policy, and a series of handwritten notes from our lawyer, James Holloway, a man who'd once told me, "Edith, paper speaks louder than family when the knives come out." Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I understood. I flipped to the section marked Contingencies, where James had sketched out a plan in the event of pressure from heirs or extended family. That was the polite way of saying, in case your children turn into greedy strangers. I ran my finger down the page until I found what I was looking for. "If, at any point, you feel your autonomy is being challenged in bad faith, contact my office immediately. Do not sign anything. Do not allow evaluations without legal counsel present. Document everything." I picked up the phone and called his office, half expecting to get his voicemail. But to my surprise, a young voice answered cheerfully. "James, Holloway and Associates. Yes, this is Edith Hanley. James did some estate planning for my late husband and me years ago. Is he still practicing? Retired last year, but he still consults on select cases. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Yes," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "It's regarding a son who just brought a senior care consultant and a photographer to my front door without my consent. I believe someone's planning a guardianship petition." The receptionist didn't gasp. but her pause told me she understood exactly what I meant. I'll patch you through to Mr. Holloway's private line. A soft click, then 2 rings. Edith, James said, his voice older but no less steady. Tell me everything. I did. Every knock, every clipboard, every veiled threat wrapped in false concern. He didn't interrupt, didn't sugarcoat. When I was done, he let out a slow sigh. It's starting, he said. Yes, I replied. And I need to finish it before it gets worse. He was silent for a moment, and then said, You still live in the Craftsman on Bay Ridge Avenue. Same house, same stubborn old lady. Good, that gives us leverage. That house has appreciated dramatically. If they're after it, it's probably because they're in financial trouble. I hadn't considered that. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Daniel had been evasive lately. Kim was always dressed in things that whispered luxury while they're social. Media posts boasted about vacation homes and renovations, but their visits had become less frequent, more transactional. James continued. We'll draft an advance directive that bars them from filing guardianship claims without your full consent. I'll also arrange for a forensic accountant to pull recent public records on Daniel's financial situation. If they're desperate, we'll find the cracks. And the house? I asked. You have options, he said. We could transfer it into a protective trust, or if you want to send a message, you could always put it on the market. That made me pause. Sell it, or buy something else, something poetic. I smiled. James always had a flair for poetic justice, but that would have to wait. First, I needed evidence, because if Daniel and Kim were planning what I thought they were, I needed to get ahead of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the Gloamthutterk numbers on my alarm clock. 2:14 a.m. I kept thinking about how calmly Kim had stood there, how she'd smiled at me like a nurse preparing a patient for sedation. And Daniel, my son, he hadn't looked me in the eyes once. That was the part that stung most. He used to come to me for advice, for comfort. Now he brought strangers into my home to appraise my independence like it was an outdated appliance. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and opened my laptop. Then I began. I wrote down every detail I remembered, from their visit, the way the photographer had angled the camera toward my stair rails, the questions about whether I still drove at night, the glances they exchanged when I said no, to everything. Then I logged into the county court website. Guardianship filings were public record. I searched my name. Nothing yet, but that didn't mean they weren't planning it. And I wasn't going to wait to find out. The next morning, James's assistant, a sharp young woman named Leela, called me back with the first round of findings. You were right to trust your instincts, Mrs. Hanley, she said. Your son and daughter-in-law are drowning in debt. I felt my stomach twist. I had hoped I was wrong, that maybe this whole thing had been a misunderstanding. But no, it was exactly what it looked like. They're behind on mortgage payments for a second property in Millbrook. There's a lien on Daniel's business. And Kim recently maxed out 2 personal lines of credit under her maiden name. Her maiden name? I asked. Looks like she was trying to keep it off the joint accounts, Leela said. But it's public now. There's even a pre-foreclosure notice filed just last week. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Not because I pitied them, but because I knew what was coming. They weren't looking to protect me. They were looking for a life raft. And my house, the Home Herald, and I built over 4 decades of modest, honest work was the rescue plan. Thank you, Lila, I said. Please, send everything to James. I'd like to meet with him tomorrow. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my kitchen, the morning sun filtering through the blinds. The tulips in the vase on my table had started to droop. I reached for the shears and trimmed the stems, suddenly struck by the metaphor. Some things needed to be cut back to bloom again. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks to my neighbor's house. Nora Jenkins, 72 years old, retired high school counselor, and the most terrifying poker player in our bridge club. I didn't knock. Nora had an open-door policy, and I'd taken her up on it ever since Harold passed. She was in the backyard, pruning her hydrangeas, a wide straw hat shielding her face from the Georgia sun. You've got that look again, she said, not turning around. The one that means someone in your family stepped on a rake and expected a bouquet. I sat on the bench beneath her willow tree and told her everything. By the time I was finished, she'd taken off her gloves and poured us both lemonade. Edith, she said, I've known you 30 years. You taught my daughter to bake. You helped me through my divorce. I know you're strong. But let me be plain, this isn't just greedy. This is war. I don't want war, I said quietly. No one does, she replied. But you don't always get to choose the battlefield. She leaned forward. So, what are you going to do? I looked out over her garden, watching bees drift lazily from bloom to bloom, and felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Double quotes. They want my house, I said. Fine, let's see how they feel when I buy theirs. Nora blinked. Excuse me. James says I'm liquid enough to make a move, I said. If their second home is in pre-foreclosure, that means it's vulnerable. I could pay cash, take it right from under them. Edith Hanley, she said, a smile spreading across her face. You vindictive, glorious woman. I love it. It's not vindictive, I said, though I couldn't help smiling too. It's educational. That night, I went into my closet and ran my hand along the back wall until I found the shoebox. Inside were the handwritten journals I'd kept since Harold died, pages of doubts, of grief, of slowly rebuilding a life without the man I'd loved. For 42 years, I pulled out one of the earlier entries. September 18, 2017. Today I made coffee for one and didn't cry. Small victory. I read it twice, then slid the journal back into the box and closed it. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was planning. 2 days later, I sat across from James Holloway in his sunlit home office, watching as he flipped through the documents Leela had compiled. Well, he said finally, they're in deeper than I thought. The second home is a liability they can't afford to keep, and from what I'm seeing, they were betting on selling your house within the next 90 days. They were that sure I'd fold. I asked. James smiled grimly. Let's just say they underestimated your tenacity, but they did everything short of filing a guardianship petition to back you into a corner. I shook my head slowly. No, they didn't underestimate me. They forgot who raised them. He chuckled. Well, Edith, you've got options. We can protect your current property with a trust and simultaneously move to acquire theirs quietly through a third-party broker. I want to move fast, I said. Can we make an offer before it hits public auction? James nodded. Yes. But if you want to stay anonymous, I'll need to act as your proxy. Good, I said. Let them find out the hard way. By the end of that week, the paperwork was in motion. Their second home in Millbrook, a leveraged, under-maintained 3-bedroom, with more granite than common sense was, under contract by me. They had no idea. And while the process quietly unfolded in the background, I kept living my life, as if nothing had changed. I watered my plants. I played bridge with Nora. I even sent Daniel a polite text on Sunday. Hope you and Kim are well. Let me know if you'd like to stop by sometime this week. I've made peach cobbler. The trap wasn't baited with anger. It was baked in butter and cinnamon. They came on Thursday. Kim was all smiles again, overly sweet like tea left in the sun too long. Daniel looked tired. His eyes flicked to the framed photo of Harold on the mantel and lingered, just a second too long. Hi, Mom, he said, sitting on the couch. You look good. I feel good, I said, pouring coffee. Still very much in control of my faculties. Despite what your consultants might think. Kim stiffened. Daniel sighed. We shouldn't have done that without talking to you first. Agreed. There was a pause. Then Kim said, we were just worried. Were you worried? I asked, setting down the tray. Or were you calculating? Daniel's jaw clenched. Mom, please don't make this adversarial. I didn't bring the clipboard. People, I said. You did. Another pause. This one, longer, heavier. Then I smiled. But all that aside, I actually invited you here for some news of my own. Kim's eyes lit up. Oh, I've decided to downsize, I said cheerfully. The house is too big. Too many stairs. You were right about that. So I put it into a trust and started looking for a smaller place. Daniel's face went pale. And wouldn't you know it, I continued, a house popped up on the market at just the right time. Quiet neighborhood, lovely hardwoods, a little dated, but charming. Kim blinked. Where? Millbrook. Daniel stood abruptly. That's yours, I said gently. Was yours. Their silence was a symphony. I made the purchase through a broker, I added. I didn't want things to get personal, but since you're here, I thought you should hear it from me. Kim's face had gone utterly blank. Daniel's ears were red. You bought our house? He whispered. I did, I said. Gosh, it should close next week. I plan to lease it to a local family. Single mom with 2 kids. They've been looking for something stable. Why would you do this? Kim spat. To humiliate us? No, I said, standing slowly. To protect myself, you came to my door with a camera and a strategy. You wanted to manage my affairs. So I decided to manage yours instead. Daniel looked like a man unraveling. You don't understand. We're under pressure. We thought maybe that I wouldn't fight back. I said that I'd just sign away my life. I'm your son, and I'm your mother, not your asset. Daniel sank back into the couch, the weight of what I'd just said clearly crashing down on him. I almost pitied him. Almost. I didn't mean for it to get like this, he mumbled, staring at the floor. Didn't you? I asked gently, because you brought strangers into my home to assess whether I was fit to live in it. You plotted. You schemed. You made my age a liability. Kim stood now too, her voice sharp. You could have just helped us. You have the money, the equity. It's not like we were asking for everything. No, I said. You were trying to take it without asking at all. Silence. Then I added, but I haven't come here just to humiliate you. I came with an offer that caught Kim's attention. What offer? I turned to Daniel. You want to fix this? You want to start again? Here's what I'm willing to do. I'll allow you to rent back your Millbrook home from me for 1 year. Modest rent, market price, no favors, no strings. You'll sign a lease like any other tenant. Kim's mouth dropped open. You're serious? Deadly, I said. But there's a condition. What kind of condition? Daniel asked cautiously. You both attend family financial counseling together, not separately, and not once. A full 6-month program. I want proof that you're taking responsibility for the choices you've made, not just to me, but to yourselves. Kim scoffed. That's absurd. Then pack your bags. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Daniel, on the other hand, looked strangely relieved, as if, for the first time in months, someone was offering him a structure he couldn't manipulate. He nodded, slowly. Okay, I'll do it. Kim turned on him. Are you out of your mind? No, he said. I'm tired. Of pretending, of hiding, of watching everything fall apart. Maybe this is exactly what we need. I gave him a long look. There was something in his face, something that resembled the boy I'd once raised, the boy who used to ask me questions about how mortgages worked, who'd built a lemonade stand, and filed a pretend business tax form at age 12. That boy had been smart, curious, good. I missed him. I hadn't missed this man until that flicker of something familiar returned. I'll have my lawyer draw up the lease, I said, gathering my things. And if we say no? Kim asked coldly. Then I find new tenants, I replied without emotion, and you learn what it feels like to be evicted by your own mother. That night, I didn't sleep, again. But it wasn't dread keeping me up this time. It was possibility. Could broken things be repaired? Could fractured relationships find new shapes? I didn't know, but for once, the next step wasn't being forced on me. It was mine to take, or not. The lease was signed by the following Monday. James drafted everything, as promised, clean, legal, ironclad. Daniel came alone to sign it. Kim didn't even show up. She said it felt beneath her, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes as he inked his name on the dotted line. That's fine, I replied, because legally, her name isn't on the property anymore. It never will be again. Daniel flinched but said nothing. Weeks passed. True to his word, Daniel started attending the financial counseling program. I confirmed it myself with the facilitator, a woman named Camille, who called me after the second session. He's quiet, she said, but engaged. It's like watching someone slowly exhale after holding their breath too long. I was cautiously hopeful. But Kim was another story. While Daniel went to group sessions and filled out budgeting worksheets, Kim was hosting influencer brunches in borrowed kitchens, still posting pictures like nothing had changed. She hadn't learned anything, and I started to suspect she never would. Then, in late October, I got a call from Nora. You need to come over, she said. Now, I didn't ask questions. I slipped on my shoes and crossed the street to her house, where she was waiting with her iPad pulled up to the local property records database. Look at this, she said, spinning the screen toward me. There, it was, a public inquiry filed under Kim's maiden name. She was attempting to file a motion for ownership reassignment due to undue influence, claiming that I had manipulated Daniel into leasing the house back under coercive conditions. She's building a case, Nora said, or trying to. Probably thinks she can flip Daniel back to her side and sue you out of the deed. I stared at the screen for a long moment, heart pounding not with fear, but with something colder. Rage. She was still playing games, still pretending this was about fairness, not control. I picked up my phone and called James. She wants a war, I said. Let's give her one. That evening, I called Daniel and asked him to come by. When he arrived, he looked exhausted, but there was something clearer in his eyes, like all the pretending had finally burned away. I assume you know why I asked you here, I said. He nodded. I saw the motion. I need to know, I said carefully, how far you're willing to let her go, because she's dragging both of you into something ugly. And if you let her, I'll have no choice but to terminate the lease. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the wind lift leaves across my porch like confetti from a celebration that had ended. Then he said, I want out. That surprised me. Out of what? Everything, he said. The pretending, the debt, the marriage. I sat back slowly. She lied to me. He continued, about the credit cards, about her student loans, about the IVF payments we never made. She's been siphoning money for over a year, even from the business account. I kept covering for her. I kept thinking I could fix it. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were wet. But I can't. I don't want to anymore. I was quiet, for a moment, letting his words settle like dust after a storm. Then I said, I need you to prove it. He blinked. You want me to leave her? He asked. No, I said. I want you to choose yourself. Choose the life you want to build, not the one someone else is demanding you maintain. When you do that, then maybe I'll believe you. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at my door with a duffel bag and red-rimmed eyes. She changed the locks, he said. I stepped aside without a word and let him in. He sat at my kitchen table like he'd done hundreds of times as a teen. This time, there were no textbooks or peanut butter sandwiches, just silence and exhaustion. I told her I was done, he said after a while, that I wanted a separation, that I was tired of living a lie. I poured him a cup of tea. She screamed. He continued, called me weak, said I was choosing you over our future. Then she told me she was pregnant. I froze, my hands stilled over the teapot, the sound of the city outside suddenly very far away. Is she? I asked carefully. He shook his head. I don't think so. I think she said it because she knew it would pull me back. But I didn't bite. I asked for proof. She didn't have any. Just accusations and threats. I sat down across from him. Did the hard thing, I said. That takes strength. He nodded. But there was no victory in his face. Just grief. I didn't want it to end like this, he said, but I couldn't let her ruin me. Or keep hurting you. That night, I made up the guest room. I didn't know how long Daniel would stay. But I knew this much. He'd taken the first honest step in years. And maybe that was enough. 2 weeks later, I stood in the back room of the local library, watching a dozen women shuffle in, some clutching handbags like lifelines, others moving with the stiff posture of someone used to defending herself in her own home. We were starting a new support group for women over 60, who'd been financially manipulated or exploited by family, by spouses, by people they'd trusted. James had connected me with a local advocacy nonprofit, and they'd welcomed me with open arms. It's rare, the director told me, to find someone who didn't just survive, but pushed back. You could help a lot of women. So here I was. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead. The coffee in the back was lukewarm. The folding chairs creaked when you sat too hard. But it felt right. I stood at the front and cleared my throat. My name is Edith, I said. And 6 months ago, my son tried to put me in a nursing home so he could take my house. The room went still. Not from shock, but recognition. That kind of silence only comes when every woman in the room has heard some version of that story. I took a deep breath, but I'm still here, in my own home, on my own terms, and I want to help you do the same. One by one, the women nodded, some cried, and just like that, we began. It came on a Tuesday morning, a thick envelope shoved into my mailbox, marked with bold legal lettering, and my full name, Edith May Hanley. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside was exactly what I expected, and yet still enough to steal the breath from my chest for a moment. Petition for emergency guardianship, filed by Kimberly Lee Hanley. Claim, mental incompetence, financial confusion, and potential self-harm due to advanced age. I read the pages slowly, methodically. She'd cited my recent erratic behavior, my vindictive property purchases, and my manipulative influence over Daniel as reasons to take legal control over my estate and, effectively, my life. She wanted the house. Again, she wanted to be appointed guardian ad litem, which meant she'd have power over my finances, my medical decisions, and if the court approved even where I lived. It was the last desperate lunge of a woman who saw her access to money slipping away. But this time, I wasn't alone. I picked up the phone and called Louise Morgan, the nonprofit's legal director, who'd helped dozens of our support group members navigate these exact battles. "I've been expecting this," she said. "You knew." She was poking around courthouse records last week, asking questions, fishing. "We're ready." Louise had the calm, deliberate cadence of a woman who'd faced worse. "We'll file a motion to dismiss, a counterclaim for harassment, and a protective injunction. We'll also file for legal fees. By the time we're done," she wished she'd just walked away quietly. I smiled, despite the heaviness in my chest. "Let's make sure she never tries this with another woman again," I said. The court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Daniel insisted on coming with me. He even testified on my behalf. "I lived with my mother for over a month," he told the judge. "She's sharp, financially literate, and more organized than I've ever been." The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and kind but perceptive eyes, looked over the stack of documents our legal team had submitted: journals, payment records, trust paperwork, psychological evaluations, and letters of support from neighbors, friends, and members of the advocacy group. Then she turned to Kim. "Do you have any evidence of incompetence? Any medical diagnosis? Any professional evaluation?" Kim sputtered. She bought our house." "That's not a crime," the judge replied. "It's a transaction, a legal, valid, and remarkably strategic one, if I may add." Laughter rippled in the courtroom. Kim flushed red. Within 15 minutes, the petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile. And when the judge awarded legal fees to our team, the look on Kim's face was a bitter cocktail of disbelief and fury. As we stepped out of the courthouse, Daniel turned to me. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything." "I know," I replied. "And now, so does the state of Georgia." 3 months passed. The house was quiet again. Daniel had moved into a modest apartment across town, not because I asked him to leave, but because he insisted it was time to stand on his own. He still visited every Sunday with groceries and small updates about his progress in therapy, but the air between us had changed. It wasn't strained, it was honest, and that, in itself, was a miracle. Kim, on the other hand, had vanished from our lives almost entirely. I knew through mutual acquaintances that she'd fled the state shortly after the court ruling, filed for bankruptcy, tried to start some kind of online coaching business under a new last name. I didn't follow her progress. I didn't need to. She had taken her war elsewhere, and I had won mine. On a Wednesday afternoon, I met with the women's group again. The library meeting room had started to feel like a sanctuary, one with mismatched chairs, stale coffee, and a chorus of women who no longer apologized for existing. That night's topic was forgiveness. The word sat heavily in the center of the circle, like a stone dropped into still water. One woman, Dolores, said she couldn't sleep without thinking of her son who'd drained her savings under the guise of investing in his future. "I want to forgive him," she said softly, "but every time I try, I feel like I'm giving him permission to do it again." Another woman, Carol, shook her head. "Then don't. Forgiveness isn't permission, and it isn't an obligation. It's a choice. One you make when it feels safe to do so, not before." They all looked at me then. The unspoken question hovering, like steam from a forgotten cup. Had I forgiven Daniel? Had I forgiven Kim? I took a breath. "I've made peace with what happened," I said. "But peace isn't the same as forgiveness. I still grieve the version of my family I thought I had. And some days, I miss that illusion more than I miss the people themselves." A few heads nodded. "I've forgiven myself," I added, "for not seeing it sooner, for raising a son who let it happen, for staying silent the first time they crossed a boundary." That part still caught in my throat. But Kim, no, I haven't forgiven her, and I don't think I need to. Some people mistake forgiveness for spiritual superiority, but the truth is, boundaries are often louder than grace. Silence followed, then a single clap from the back of the room. Janice, the oldest woman in the group, 81, sharp as a tack, Brutal in the best way. Well said, she muttered. Hallelujah. The room broke into quiet laughter. Later, that night, back home, I lit a single candle in the living room and stared at the framed photo on the mantel. Harold, smiling in that quiet way he always had when something amused him and he didn't want to admit it. What would you think of all this? I whispered. He didn't answer. But maybe I didn't need him to, because I already knew. Spring came early that year. The azaleas bloomed along the front walk like they were auditioning for a postcard. My garden, once an afterthought in the chaos of court hearings and betrayal, had returned to life with bold, unapologetic color. It felt symbolic. So did the knock at the door. I opened it to find a young woman, early 20s, maybe, standing on my porch with a toddler balanced on her hip, and exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Hi," she said, shifting nervously. "Are you Mrs. Hanley?" "I am. My name's Eliza," she said. "I think you spoke with my Aunt Camille from the counseling center. She said you sometimes mentor women like me." I studied her gently. She had that look I knew all too well. The look of someone who had been used up and was trying desperately to reclaim what was left. "Come in," I said, pushing open the screen door. "You're right on time." That evening, after Elisa left Bay fed, notebook full of referrals, and posture just slightly straighter than when she arrived, Di stood by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. The house was still, but not lonely. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Started a new job today, helping manage an elder law nonprofit. Thought you'd be proud. Hope you're still keeping your coffee strong and your boundaries stronger. Love you, Mom." I smiled. I turned off the lights, one by one, then paused before the porch. I left it on, not for Daniel, not for Kim, not even for Harold, but for whoever came next. Because the truth was, I hadn't just defended a house, I'd rebuilt a home, and this time, the door would only open for those who truly deserved to be inside. The end.